Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I'm so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. The show is a place where we pour into the sense of who God is, who we are, and how we can live more in the freedom that He has for us every single day. Hello, and welcome to the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I am so happy to be here with you every Tuesday. I am right at the end of my maternity leave right now, and so I'm excited to get back and be having conversations with you again. But today, prior to leave, I got to have a conversation with just someone who has become a dear friend who just has such a beautiful story that speaks really well into the lie that we're fighting this month, this lie about being a burden when we have needs. And we know that there are thousands, hundreds, millions of people in our society that have needs at a much higher level than a lot of people. And I think it's so valuable to dig into the story of their lives and to see the just incredible value and beauty that they bring into the lives of the people that they do their lives with. Because I hope that that can help console our hearts about the value that we bring, even when we also have needs that we need to share with those around us. And this is just such a wonderful topic for my guest, Mary Lenaburg, to speak into. She was a caregiver for many years for her beautiful daughter, Courtney, and I'm going to let her share all the details of her story. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Mary.
Jill, it is such a pleasure to be with you. Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So share with us a little bit about your journey with Courtney and caregiving. I know it's a long and beautiful one, and Mary has several books that I will recommend at the end of the podcast about her whole journey. But if you want to give us kind of the Cliff Notes version.
Sure. So I've been married for now 34 years to my husband, Jerry. We were blessed with 4 souls, 2 we didn't get to hold and 2 we did. Our son, Jonathan, who's now married and expecting his own first baby. And then our daughter, Courtney. And Courtney, when she was 5 weeks old on the day of her baptism, began having grand mal seizures for no known reason, no known medical reason. So when she was 7 months old, as we were trying to figure out how to help her with these seizures, she was given a medication that she actually had an allergic reaction to that gave her a brainstem seizure. So for the remainder of her life, and she was with us for 22 years, from that point on, she was cortically blind, which means she could see light and dark, but she couldn't see like your face. And she was wheelchair bound, nonverbal, and the developmental age of a 7 to 9 month old child. So she never walked, she never talked. She was a beautiful, wonderful, peaceful, joyful young lady. But she was a baby pretty much for the entirety of her time with us before the Lord brought her home in December of 2014.
And it is such an interesting thing how this story of Courtney has, and interesting isn't even the word I want to use, such a beautiful thing, how this story of Courtney has touched thousands of people since you've been sharing it. Because you started sharing about your journey during her life, correct?
I did. We started blogging in 2007, I think it was, and just kind of bringing people into the daily life of what it was to be the caregiver and a mother of a special needs child. There wasn't a lot out there. I mean, we exist, we were everywhere, but there wasn't a lot online. And so I decided to start to bring people into our story, to get to know her, get to know us as a family and how it all worked.
Absolutely. I love that in a past conversation that we had, you shared about kind of the necessity of having this wall of joy, being a phrase that your husband sort of coined about the situation of really, when you went out into the world with Courtney and you made, and you were a presence with her, about how people reacted and what the perception was. Will you share with us more about what that was like?
Sure. Well, it would go one of 2 ways. We were kind of a house of drama, right? A house of extremes. So I would have to say that the majority of the time she was welcomed. She was, the kids were always curious. So you'd get these little ones coming up to you asking what was wrong. You'd get the daredevil 6 or 7-year-old little boy wanting to push her wheelchair and use it like a race car. Just lots of different things. Of course, when she had a seizure in public, that was always scary, intimidating, and people usually were very, they would avert their eyes and kind of walk in the other direction. And that's totally understandable. It was hard, but I get that because they didn't understand what was going on. Sometimes though, as I write about in my second book, we were just outright rejected. People looked at Courtney as a lot. Here was this tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, she had curls like Shirley Temple, and she sounded like Chewbacca from Star Wars. She made very loud sort of humming sounds, and it could be intimidating. I mean, that was just Courtney in a happy day. So you had to be prepared for both. And so when Jerry came up with that phrase, a wall of joy, like when we left this house, we were prepared for either reaction, but we knew who Courtney was. We knew God had given her to us specifically and intentionally. We were to protect her, we were to provide for her, and we were to honor her dignity and her humanity. And so she had every right to go out in the world. She had every right to experience the world as best she could experience the world. One of my favorite stories to tell is with her brother, Jonathan. He was in high school. She had to get new jeans. She had actually gained some weight, which was always a reason to celebrate. And so we were at the mall and I was in the Gap. And I came out of the Gap and he was rapping the song that was playing on the mall, sound system. And he was rapping it. Now, my son, Jonathan, is 6'2", has a beard, big white guy, no rhythm, no supernatural gifting of rapping. And he was rapping this song because she loved the beat of it. She could feel the beat of it. Her hearing was perfect and she was just laughing and it was beginning to draw a crowd. And so people started asking questions and Jonathan was answering them. And it was just this beautiful moment of community, for lack of another word, where he shared his love of his sister in a very public way and people were drawn into that. And that's the secret of Courtney. That's what she did. She drew you into her. And by drawing you into her, you were drawn into Christ. And so she just was the heart of our home. And, yes, it was hard. She could do nothing for herself. We had to do everything for her. She had a G tube, which is a feeding tube in her stomach to help her stay hydrated and nutrient, all the nutrients that had to go in there. She couldn't eat enough to do what needed to be done to make sure she was as healthy as she could be. So there were pumps and there were wheelchairs and there were lifts. And I mean, we had equipment, and we had Big Bertha, our wheelchair van. We even named her. She's big white wheelchair van. And that she made a statement when she arrived, at the church parking lot. This is a situation. So, was it hard? Yes, every single day was hard. Were there a lot of tears? Absolutely. But she's been now gone and home with the Lord for 7 years. And if God were to come down today and say, Mary, would you like another day with her? I would say yes, forever and ever, no matter what. Absolutely. She just is such a blessing.
And so share more about how that was really realized in your life, because in your first book, you go through so much of what your personal transformation was from when Courtney came into your family versus who you were towards the end of the walk with her. And then even afterwards, the way that she continues to inform how you are and how you see yourself and other people.
Yeah, Courtney, raising her, loving her, caring for her was transformative. And I don't use that word lightly. As you refer to the books that I've written, Jerry and I were very different people when Courtney was born. We were very much into ourselves. We were dealing with addictions, him to pornography, myself to food. We were not the best Christians in the world, weren't really following all the things that you're supposed to do. And we were very self-centered, really, to be perfectly honest with you. And what Courtney did for us was, first of all, 80% of marriages that have a special needs child end in divorce. And so we were very concerned about that. And of course, we were dealing with all these other things, as well as Courtney's medical situation. And what Courtney did was the reverse of that. She drew us together and created a team, Team Courtney. She drew us, the three of us together, and we fought for her and with her. And that was the greatest gift she could have given us. Because without Courtney, I'm not sure I'd still be married. I'm not sure I would have had the family that we have. Our son wouldn't be as empathetic and compassionate as he is. My husband wouldn't be so trusting of the because he's a control freak. He had to surrender everything. So I just, I don't know where we would be without Courtney. Would not be who we are. And what she did was when you're so into yourself, the greatest answer to that is to go outward, right? Serve. That's the first thing any spiritual director will tell you, any pastor, priest, anybody. When you're so focused on yourself and you're really freaking out, serve. And so we had no choice. In order for Courtney to thrive and to live her best life, we had to serve. That was the greatest lesson she taught us, to love another person and to see the face of Christ within that person. The second thing she taught us was how to be present, how to stay present in the present moment. Because when Courtney would have a seizure, she would stop breathing, she would go 20, 30, 40 seconds without taking a breath, turn blue, all of that. And it was very scary. And we never knew if that was going to be the very last seizure. We never knew if that was going to be the last breath she took. So she really gave me a focus to my day. And she kind of, we came in on, this was the most important thing, right? Courtney was having a seizure, nothing else mattered. Her recovery, nothing else mattered. She made me present in the present moment. And I think we forget that in our society today. We're all worried about tomorrow, next week, next month, all the things. And we forget that God has not given us tomorrow. That's not been given. Yesterday is gone and we can't get it back. We are given today, and to live today well and fully. And she taught us how to do that. And I'm still affected by that today. Those two lessons, to meet someone where they are, to see the face of Christ in them, and to remain present in my day, not to go off on the adventure of what has to be done 20 days from now, 20 years from now, but to remain present still is what I work on every single day. And that reliance on God and not reliance on myself, because I do none of this without him. That's just not possible. So the lessons of her life continue every single day. She's with me every day. She's never left this house. I mean, her body has left this house, but her spirit remains. And I talk to her every day. I pretty much make a lot of demands of her now that she's a saint in heaven. I'm like, excuse me, I know you're busy with all the other people, but I'm the mama. So I really need you now. So yeah, she's great. She's just a fantastic intercessor.
Yeah.
She brings my needs before the Lord every day. So I really appreciate the attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's so interesting when you have these acute situations that are out of anybody's control. So, a medical need like Courtney's, or you have in a more acute situation, there's a death in the family or something like that. And there's just always room for what has to happen in those very, like you were saying, kind of present in this moment. This is now, and we need to deal with it kind of things. And the contrast is that I think a lot of times when we as, kind of traditional functioning human adults feel that putting our needs in front of those people that we love is burdening them and really demanding something of them, like it's something that they don't want to or don't have to give. But when we have these things come up that are out of our control, it's almost, I don't know if it's easier, but it's more organic to invite people into those things because you just kind of have to.
Well,
and
they're think of the death in family. Let's just go with that. That's the most obvious one, right? Things have to be done. You have to go to the funeral home. You have to set up the church service, whatever faith tradition you practice. Or if you don't, whatever that's going to be, there has to be a burial. There's all these things, right? And of course, it's a death. So people are empathetic, they're compassionate. So, and you don't say no because you're so overwhelmed with the details that they're bringing, it's always interesting when you go to the repast, the meal after the service, right? Food is everywhere. It's everywhere. I did not cook for like 7 months after Courtney died, 7 or 8 months after Courtney died. I did not cook. I had frozen meals. I had 3 times weekly deliveries because this is something that people can do. They want to help. It's how we say, I love you to people, right? So they wanted to help. And that's how they could help. They couldn't help, show up and clean something. Some women did. Women came to my home and cleaned my home. I don't even remember that. I know it happened because they remember it. And my husband remembers it. I don't, right? Because family was coming in from out of town and we had been in this sort of wait and see with Courtney's passing. So we want to help. It's ingrained in us to kind of reach out to the community. But what we don't want to do is ask for help. And that is the kicker, the 3-letter word that nobody wants to do. Because if you ask, then you are a burden. Then you are seen as, you feel as one. I don't think you're ever seen as one. I think it's what we keep up here, So having to ask for something is humbling. And what I go to for that, because I had to ask many times, was Mother Teresa, beautiful Mother Teresa, served so beautifully. She used to say, in order for someone to learn what charity was, to learn charity, right, to receive, somebody had to be humble enough to receive it. So I remember my best friend Christine saying that to me around Courtney's death. And she's like, Mary, you have to be humble enough to receive it because this is what needs of you right now. And so learned how to ask. And that has translated now, 7 years after her death. I ask Jerry all the time. A lot of the times I don't even need to ask anymore. He'll look at me, he'll see how the day has gone. Maybe it's been a day where there's been some pics of grief, throughout the day, or as we were preparing a year ago for my son's wedding, there's the emotions of Courtney would never have a wedding. She should be here. This is her brother's big day. She was going to be the 4th bridesmaid. So they had 3 bridesmaids and then they made a beautiful bouquet for her and they placed it at her grave. Things like that are so meaningful to our family, but that they're hard on the heart. Right. And so I had to ask for time. I had to ask for space. I had to, say, could you take the dog tonight and go walk? I just need to be quiet, and I didn't always do that because I wanted everybody else to be taken care of. And what I didn't realize was they needed to help and they didn't know how to kind of bully their way in because they didn't want to make me feel incapable of doing all the things I knew I could do. So they thought they were respecting me by not kind of pushing in. And I thought I was respecting them by not being a burden. And we were both wrong. So lesson learned.
I love that story. It's so interesting because November of 2021, when I started praying about my word of the year for 2022, the Lord, in just like classic bait and switch fashion, we're still having words about this because he was like, your word of the year is going to be receive. And I was like, how lovely, how sweet. Like, I'm just going to receive from you this year. And we get into 2022 and like literally like day 2 or 3, the Lord's like, let's go spend some time with the verse where this came from. Ask and you shall receive. It's like, this year just got a lot less fun and easy, Lord, because the asking is so hard, like you were talking about. And I discovered throughout the course of this year and walking with this word and walking in conversation with the Lord about it, that I really had this lie that I always kept perpetuating in my thoughts that sounds kind of innocuous when you first hear it, but it was this lie that you get what you deserve. Mm-hmm. And that was driving so much of the way I was acting because I was perceiving that when I deserved something, someone would just show up and hand it to me versus having the humility, like you said, to actually ask for it. And this comes up so frequently in the way that our society now is just fractured within the families, within the communities, all of these things that a lot of times there's a sense that there's nobody really like close enough, somebody that's in it enough with you to ask. And I think that it is such a beautiful testament to both humility and vulnerability to be the one that actually steps out, because how honored do we feel as individuals when somebody trusts us with these?
Oh, I know. It's such a gift to us. When I'll get a phone call from a girlfriend in another state and she'll be like, Mary, I just need 2 minutes. I'm like, I'm here. What do you need? And they'll just go, that rat-a-tat-tat of, wow, this is life. And then you're like, all right, take a deep breath. Do you want me to pray with you? Do you want to talk about it? What do you want to, I see where they are, and they'll choose one or none. I just needed to get it off my chest. I got to go back to my kids. And, by the end of that phone call, whether it be 1 minute, 3 minutes, an hour, you're like, God was really in that. They reached out to someone and they let go of some of whatever it was that was festering and the frustration or whatever was happening, right? Grief, sadness, happiness, joy. I had a phone call this morning, overflowing joy. They just didn't know what to do. They were like, how is this possible? God is so good. And I'm like, because God is so good. When you said, ask and you shall receive, if we don't believe, or you get what you deserve, if we don't believe that we deserve, we don't deserve God dying on the cross for us. We can never earn it. And that was the beauty of Courtney. When you looked at Courtney, there was no way she could earn your love. She would never perform. She would never achieve. She just was love. And when we look at the cross, that's who God is. He is love. It's all he can do. He is love. He gives it. He receives it. He created it. He is love. And so, it's the other guy, the guy that lives downstairs in the heated basement, that really loves to whisper that doubt into us and say, well, I guess you didn't deserve that. I don't deserve to breathe. So how about we raise the bar? If I want to honor what God did on the cross for me, then I can show up and receive the grace of that suffering, the grace of that gift that he gave me. When I show up and I reject it, when I say I don't deserve it, I'm telling him he didn't give enough. And he gave his life. What else do you want? It's just, and as I get older, that it just lands so differently now. My youth, I was like, how arrogant, how horrible, and just not in tune with who God was. But I needed to learn. And that's where suffering comes in. That's where this idea of burden, beautiful burden, comes in. I had to learn to walk with him. I didn't know him. I didn't trust him. I didn't really have faith in him. I just knew he was this dude that I went to church every Sunday because mom and dad said you had to. And until I really embraced that individual walk with him, I could have been bitter and angry. I could still be bitter and angry. God brought her home. She's not here. When she was here, she didn't do anything any typical kid did, right? She was atypical. So I can be angry. Sure, we can all be angry. But what does anger get us? It gets us nothing. It gets us nothing but depression and sadness and gloominess and awfulness. And God didn't die on the cross for that. He died to give me hope, to bring joy, to bring peace, and blessing. And Courtney was a blessing and continues to be a blessing 7 years later, and will always be a blessing to this family.
Absolutely. One of my mentors says, and I just love it, where she says, I am just committed to the fact that I'm going to do everything I can to give Jesus everything he paid for, which is like that total acceptance of what he offers. And that starts so much with asking. And I think that it's really interesting because that is in the journey that, and we do this in our retreat on trust, for those of you that have taken it, that are listening, where we talk about how so often it's a part of the process that God invites us to ask for what it is that we need. And so often we show up with this like if I deserve it, I'll get it kind of mindset, without following it through to the logical conclusion. Like you pointed out, Mary, like, we didn't deserve any of this. Like, then I guess we're just out of luck before we even get started, and we can't even be Christian because of that. And so when we follow these things, these thoughts all the way through to their end, is so often when we can realize, did this come from a good place, or did this come from, I love the guy in the heated basement. That's going to be my new phrase for him.
I don't even want to give him a name. I'm just not even going to do that. I'm reminded in this conversation, you take it back to like a Christian root. Remember the Canaanite woman in scripture, she's Canaanite. So she's a pagan. She's not a Christian. And here's Jesus. He comes to Canaan. He's sitting at the table, he's eating, and she shows up, and her daughter is sick and dying. And she knows without a doubt that this is God, this is the Messiah, and he can help her. And so she comes to him and she's like, help me. It's my favorite line in scripture. Help me. Now, God knew what she needed because he's God. Jesus knew her daughter was dying. He knew the state of this woman's heart. But what he needed was for her to know how much you really believe, right? So she says, help me. And he kind of insults her and says, I didn't come here for you. And she's like, but I know you can do this. I know you can heal her. And he continues to kind of challenge her. And the final point is, he basically calls her a dog, which was a horrible insult at the time. Well, still is now. And she says, I don't care. I'll eat the scraps from your table. I'll be that because I know you can heal her. And what he was doing was he was looking for her to understand who he was in her and her strength and her faith in him, to solidify that. And what does he say to her? Go now, woman of great faith, your daughter is healed. Now, a lot of people throw that scripture in my face because my daughter wasn't healed here on earth. But see, that's not the point. If we live with an eternal perspective, I'm not looking at my time on earth. That is a blip on the screen. I'm looking eternally. And eternally, my daughter is a saint in heaven. She is now praising in the holy courts of the Lord. And as a parent, that's our job. Our job is to pray our kids, act our kids, do whatever we can. Please, Lord, take my child, to get them to heaven, right? And ourselves as well. And so I know my mother still prays for me. I will always pray for my son. My daughter's a saint, an innocent, gone to the Lord. She's taking care of all of us, right? But we have to look at, God is not surprised by your circumstance. He's not surprised by the burdens, the blessings that he has allowed in your life, because those are going to be the people and the situations that bring you to your knees. And you finally are able to say, I cannot do this. And you ask humbly, Lord, Jesus, I trust in you. Please take care of everything. I can't do it. I can't do it. And that's all he wants. He just wants you to say, okay, that's what I'm here for. That's what I died for. Thank you for letting me in.
I notice sometimes in people that have really effortfully closed the door to the Lord, sometimes it seems like from the outside, like, wow, everything is just kind of clicking in their life. Like they're just kind of going along in the house and the job and the kid and the whatever. And my husband and I were having this conversation, and he was like, why does it seem like all of the like really devout Christians we know have such challenging lives? And obviously we don't have like the final answer. We're not God, but we were positing that it is exactly the openness to God moving in our lives that creates these opportunities for him to really reset the bone, right? To have these things come into our lives that are very challenging. And we have the grace of losing the illusion that we are in control, because ultimately, no matter who you are, no matter what your situation is, if you feel like you're in control, that is an illusion. Mm-hmm. And so having the grace to actually experience, oh, this is an illusion and I can't live from this place anymore, is can be an incredible grace when received in that spirit. And that's what I experience when I look at the struggles in my own life and things that I have walked through, where it's really like, Gosh, I'm thankful for this because as we brought up earlier, like when we were young, we were very arrogant and
Oh,
stupid and made a lot of
everybody's like, I want to be young again. I'm like, I do not. I do not. I would like my 23-year-old body. I'll take that. But like everything else, no, 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 thank you. You know, that's a common thing that you were discussing. Everybody else looks like they're having such a great time, right? Everything's clicking off. It's going great for them. But you use the beautiful word openness and vulnerability. You have no idea what is going on behind those closed doors. And having been invited into those spaces, I can tell you it's a bigger mess than what you see in my life because they have closed the door to God. They have closed the door, and they've closed it out of fear. They've closed it out of frustration. They've closed it out of arrogance, out of pride. But, you know, God is a gentleman. He's never going to force himself in. So he asks you to open the door from the inside. He asks you to say just a little bit. All I need is a little bit for the light to shine through. And that's why you and I and others are called to this missionary life, right? I don't have to go stand on the grocery store parking lot and preach the gospel, right? God's not asking that. I hope he's not asking that of me because I didn't hear that in prayer anytime recently, but he's asking me to live my life in an authentic way. Not, hey, look at me. I am, you know, Mary Christian over here. No, but to love people where they are, to keep my door open and a seat at the table. That's it. And to just do the next right thing, to do my best every day. And when I fail, which I will, and often, to take advantage of the beautiful things that my faith, I'm a Roman Catholic, that allow me to repair that breach, repair that mistake, you know, to go in and receive the sacrament. So I just, I'm so grateful to be a Roman Catholic. I'm so grateful for the way my parents raised me, although I thought they were crazy and insane and hated every minute of it. And I tell my mother that all the time. I'm like, I love you so much. Thank you for like not drowning me like a cat. And you know, when I was 5, and she just looks at me and I'm like, Mom, I was really bad. She's like, no, you were a child. You know, there's a difference. But, you know, just those things that frustrate us so much. And I was telling Jerry, my husband, the other day, I said, you know, something had happened. I got frustrated again. And I said, apparently I have not learned that lesson yet, because here we are again. You know, we have those habitual things that come back to our lives. And he was just laughing. He goes, yep, we haven't learned it yet. And so, you know, that's another lesson Courtney taught us. You're going to fall, you're going to fail, bad things will happen. And yet you are still called to love, and you're still called to have hope, and you're still called to pour yourself into the life God has given you. So you just do your best. And that's all we could ever do. And I'm grateful. I'm so incredibly grateful. That's not a big enough word for me, for the gift of loving Courtney and loving Jonathan, and now watching him begin his new life with his wife, and a little one on the way, and to see where the Lord is going to lead them. I know they are facing challenges, they'll face challenges in the future, but to know, especially on Jonathan's behalf, you know, what he has lived through, and therefore what skills he has, what coping skills he has for life, that his sister gave him. So those are hard earned, and you don't want to waste them. So I am blessed. I am blessed for the burden that was my daughter, of her physical existence. And I'm blessed to have her looking out for us even today.
Mary, if people would like to connect with you online after listening to this podcast, where's the best place to do that? We will also put these links in the description, but you can give them verbally also, Mary.
The best place really is I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. Instagram is my platform of choice. I love it. I am on Facebook, but not as often. Or you could contact me through my website at marylenaburg.com. You can purchase my books wherever books are purchased. And I answer all my direct messages myself. I answer all my emails myself. So you really will be talking to me. And that's just such a joy when I get to meet new people and be able to pray for them and walk with them and encourage them in their journey.
Mary has such a beautiful gift for mentoring and just walking with those of us that are younger than her. And that has been such a blessing in my life. And so I just really want to honor what you bring into the space, Mary, doing that, because I think that a lot of times it's people my age or similar age that are active on Instagram and things like that. And it's so, so valuable to have that diversity of voices. And so I just so value you being active there.
Thank you. I believe we are meant to do intergenerational missionary work. We're meant to journey together. Mary and Elizabeth journeyed together and they were not the same age. So we're meant to do this life in community. And that's just a great place to do it.
Absolutely. As always, it's such a joy, Mary. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jill. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. It is always a joy to be with you. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, whichever place you most prefer, or do it all if that is what floats your boat. We would love to continue to get to know you better and grow in relationship with you. And so I encourage you to check out the links in both our show notes and our YouTube description that tell you more about where you can connect with us elsewhere. The two big things we have going on besides the podcast is our shop that is full of reminders of who you are in God, helping you to really grow in that radical art of standing in who you are and giving gifts that help others to do the same. The other big thing we have going on is the Uprising Academy. This is all of our formation programs, workshops, retreats. Everything is available virtually and on demand, where you can sign up and continue to learn more about radically standing in what God says about you, especially if you are in a place in your life where you are not being fed the way that you long to be fed. Whether it's in your community, whether it's at your church, whatever it is, there is more for you, and we can absolutely walk with you into it through the Uprising Academy. All those links are in our show notes, and if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to leave a review. Reviews are the number one way that we help get in front of new faces, new people that are able to be touched by the radical art of standing in what God says about us. I love you. I'm praying for you. I hope you have an amazing week.